Hello and welcome to today's video. Today a little discussion, a little bit of a retrospective on this pen, the Jinhao x450s. This was one of my first EDC pens and I'm really excited to be looking at it again. So if this video is of interest to you, please like, subscribe, hit the notifications button, all that kind of stuff. But let's get started. When I first got into fountain pens, I had back into fountain pens, I should say, I only had a few in my collection and I was kind of hesitant and nervous to take them outside of the house. I didn't love the idea of losing them or damaging them and things like that. So I went on the hunt for something that was affordable, that I wouldn't mind losing, but that was reliable, that was, sturdy and all of that kind of stuff. And I settled on the x450 from Jinhao. This is a heavy, decent sized metal pen. It's robust-ish. It's got a lot of great things about it. There are a few niggly issues, like after all this time, the cap is now a little bit loose, things like that. But, it writes quite well. And at one point I had like 25 of these, every color. I was obsessed with this pen model. I loved it. So I was swapping, nibs out on them and all those kinds of things, putting, the Yovo nibs from Goulet and things like that in them. I was grinding the nibs. I was doing all of that. And in the end, I kept coming back to just a straight up plain medium that came on the pen. When I was getting these initially, they were like between $4 and $6 Australian dollars each, which was madness. Now they're around the 10 to 11, which is still madness because that is ridiculously cheap for a pen like this. But the pen hasn't changed. Just prices and taxes and all those kinds of things around it have changed over the last 9 or 10 years. Is it still value at this point? Well, I think so. Like, it writes reliably, it comes with a converter, all of that kind of stuff. I think it's a really good pen. I've been carrying this again for the last couple of months as one of my EDC pens, and I've never had a problem with it. Like, it writes beautifully every time. The only issue I said is that the cap is a bit loose now, but it still stays on. It's still airtight enough to write. So really, it's a fantastic pen at its price point, and it's a nice looking pen as well. For a while I was EDC carrying the red version with the black ends. I thought that looked sort of classy and classic, but there is something about this blue and gold version that really sort of hits home. I think because the first fountain pen I had was that Parker Sonnet in this finish, I wanted to sort of replicate some of that in my sort of EDC at the beginning of my time back in fountain pens. And because I didn't have the Parker at that point, I've now re-gotten that from my parents' house, buried under the stairs. But yeah, I think I wanted to replicate some of that in this pen. And it's a classic looking pen. People who don't know anything about fountain pens, when they see this pen, they think it's a really expensive pen, which isn't the reason for using it. I'm not, I don't do this for show, but it's kind of nice to know that the things you have are appreciated by the people around you, even if it only cost you, at the time, $6 Australian dollars. So I'm going to do a very short mini review of it now to show you writing it, show parts and features and things. I think it's a really good pen option still. There are better pens in this price range, and I'll show a couple of those in the video, what my recommendations are for sort of EDC carry at this point, in this sort of cheaper we'll call it the sub 20 Australian dollar category. But I think the Jinhao x450 is a really nice pen. So let's look at it in a little bit more detail now. So top of the pen is just a domed end. This is a lacquered brass body with a gold colored clip, which is really super usable. It's probably one of the most perfect tensions on a clip in my opinion. The cap swells slightly. We get that center band that says Jinhao and x450 on it. And then it'll step down onto the barrel, which tapers slightly to a gold ring, and then that sort of domed end cap. It is a snap cap, and this is one of the things that I have issue with the pen, is the capping. Like I said, this pen is several years old, and the cap has sort of come a bit loose. Like there's just some rattle in it now. I'll come back to that in a bit. But snap cap, plastic grip section with these sort of like little facets in it. Little gold furniture, and then a steel It says 18K GP gold plated. Yeah, well, anyway. And sort of vaguely sort of a medium nib size. And plastic feed. It is a standard cartridge converter pen, and I've had many cartridge converters in this pen over the years. They sort of tend to... They're one of the converters that they're reliable, but they do sort of tend to have a lifespan that is outlived by the pen, if that makes sense. It's a very simple, clean pen. It's heavy, like it weighs 44 grams, but it's reliable, it's robust. It does all the things that a pen of this price point should do, or actually pens at a much higher price point, like coming with a converter. Came with converter. Yeah. $10 fountain pen with a converter. And yet we, forgive companies, not providing converters at 50, 60, 100, 150, $200 pens, It's been a bugbear of mine over the years, and I'm not going to give up on it. All fountain pens should be provided with a converter. If a $10 Jinhao pen can, any pen can. We're not asking for Schmidt K5s and everything. We're just asking for a converter. Okay, anyway, that's my complaints. So that, it's a very comfortable pen in the hand. As I said, it's quite heavy. The weight of the pen is slightly back weighted, but because it's not a super long pen unposted, it's still very comfortable. You can post it and it does back weight a little bit, but it still sits relatively comfortably sort of on the webbing of the hand. And I find myself not posting it. I normally use this, as I said, this was an EDC pen. I carried one of these for quite a while, and it would just sort of, I'd take it out, I'd write something on a to-do list or whatever, put it back in my bag, and that's what it was used for. And it was great for that, because if I lost it, if I broke it, it didn't really matter. And I carried a bunch of these over the years as this pen model. As an EDC, a lot of times I would swap out to Goulet or other branded Yovo steel number 6 nibs. But yeah, the standard one that comes on it like this, as you'll see in the writing sample, it does a pretty decent job. Lamy Safari, Jinhao x450. It's about the same length, uncapped. We see that the Lamy is a little longer in that format, but it has also has a slightly longer section. But it's it's got its smaller nib there. And then both pens do post, and they're roughly the same sort of size. So it's a good size pen. It's solid, but it definitely weighs double what a Lamy Safari weighs, being a lacquered brass body pen and then, a plastic pen. But also much different price point, but both equally good sort of EDC pens. Specific dimensions of the Jinhao x450, 141 millimeters capped, 124 uncapped, 161 when it's posted. Around the middle of the grip section is about 9.5 millimeters, and around the center of the cap is about 13.9. As I said, the pen weighs 44 grams, 28.5 in the body and 15.5 in the cap. So it's not a lightweight pen. It is robust. You feel it in your pocket, and that's also, for me, a pro when it comes to being an EDC pen. Okay, so let's do a super quick writing sample here with the Jinhao x450 with its steel number 6, so which is why I'd replace them with Yovo number 6 nibs, because you can just literally slip that nib off and put a Yovo nib in its place. It's really great. This is vaguely a medium. The ink in this is Jinhao Blue Black. I had a bottle of this sitting in my storage. And then Doodlebud started making a bunch of, content about it. I thought, I should really put that in a pen. And when I thought about reintroducing this pen into my EDC, I thought it was a perfect option. So you can see it writes nice. It's good. And this is what you want for an EDC pen. Like, I've never had a problem with any of these. Like, occasionally you get one that isn't amazing and you have to do a little bit of work to tune it. And I can't remember if I tuned this particular nib, but it is writing very, very well and quite wet. And that's the other thing I've loved about these over the years, is that they do write quite wet. It's a nice sort of, if you're wanting an ink that, a pen, that will write with shimmer inks and things, this is kind of a good option. Or if you want a pen that's going to bring out sheening and shading. A little bit of a skippy start there, but that's okay. Sort of sheening properties from inks. This isn't a bad option. There's a lot going for this pen, and that's why I carried it for so long, and why it was one of my first choices when I wanted to have a pen that I could carry that I didn't have to worry about. When, for me, a $70 Australian pen was an expensive pen. It still is not a cheap pen. $70 is not cheap for a pen. Let's be honest here. When you think of that, this is a $10 fountain pen that writes this well, or you can get ballpoint pens, gel pens, rollers, all that kind of stuff for less than $5. Heck, you could get one of these like Snow White disposable pens from Temu, a pack of 5 of these or 8 of these or something for $6. There are options around. $70 is not a cheap pen, but it is cheap for a fountain pen. It is on the lower end of fountain pens. But at the time, $70 was a lot for a pen for me. I hadn't delved into that sort of territory. So carrying something that was $10 or at that point less than $5 was a much better option. And speaking of those options, let's run through a few now. So obviously, in a slightly higher price point, there are a bunch of pens that I would consider as EDC pens now. And I'm not going to talk about, brands like Wingback or Big Idea Design or even the Traveler's pen, which are designed as EDC pens. I'm talking about standard pens that work really nicely as simple everyday carry pens. So Lamy Safari, Pilot Kakuno, Pilot Metropolitan, Kaweco Sport, Kaweco Piquio, all these sorts of pens that, are regular visitors. TWSBI Eco, TWSBI 580 if you can stretch the budget to that point. I want to talk about pens that are a little more affordable, and based on that, yes, they are sort of on the Chinese market. So the Jinhao x450, of course, a recent favorite of mine, the Moonman B25, very different pen. It's modeled off the Parker 25, but it's got a really lovely sort of form and function. It comes in around the 10 Australian dollar mark, which is great. The Hongdian C1 or C2, really lovely everyday carry pen, really affordable again. I've made a bunch of videos about the C1, very, very good. The Wingsung 601, a little bit more expensive, but, a wonderful option. These all have their little quirks and their own little, advantages and disadvantages, but these are sort of options you can sort of get. I'll move that one out to make room for, I've got 3 Jinhaos that I think are interesting options. Firstly, something like the 9019. This is a big pen, or even the X159. Big pen, really affordable, great build quality, number 8 size nib. If you're after something that's a little bigger, a little bit more flashy, that's a great option. And then simple options, the Jinhao 82, which is modeled off Sailor Pro Gear, and the Jinhao 80, which is modeled vaguely off the Lamy 2000. These are all pens that come in around the same kind of price point, different forms and functions and things, but really lovely options if you're after something inexpensive that writes, that if you lose it, you're not going to worry. If you break it, you're not going to worry. So is the Jinhao x450, at the top of this list, is it still worth it as an EDC pen in 2026? I genuinely believe it is. It's not a perfect pen. The snap cap, the liner sort of splits and the snap cap becomes loose and all that kind of stuff. Not every nib is going to be a winner, and that faceted grip section's not going to be for everyone. But it's kind of cheap or affordable, like the price is good. Some of them write incredibly well. It's a generally fairly robust pen. It's got some beautiful finishes. I'm not exactly sure what finishes are still available on this pen, but there are options. And then something even like at this price point, being a number 6 size nib with a decent sort of ball of tipping, there's no reason why you couldn't practice grinding or tuning nibs and things on these without fear of ruining something more expensive. In fact, the entire pen costs less than buying a nib unit from brands like Yovo or Schmidt. So it's an interesting option. I think it still stands up. It still writes beautifully, or mine do. It's sort of been overshadowed by some other Jinhao pens in recent years, but I think there's still a lot to be said for the Jinhao x450. All right, so that was the Jinhao x450. As I said, I've been carrying this pen again for the last couple of months. I've really enjoyed it. I think there are better pens on the market, but like where I was at the point when I got this was like the perfect pen for me to carry, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, hit the notifications button, all that kind of stuff. If you've got products that you think I should be looking at, or if there's a way you would like to support the channel, I would love to hear from you. So enjoy your pens, enjoy writing, and I'll talk to you again soon.